Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Mix-Up. Gerard Baxter adjusted his tie as he walked through the gleaming lobby of Meridian Financial, the investment firm where he'd worked as a senior analyst for the past 8 years. At 34, Gerard had built a reputation for his sharp, analytical mind and unshakable composure, traits that had served him well in both his professional life and his role as a devoted father to 7-year-old Emma. The morning had started like any other. His wife, Sally, a pediatric nurse at St. Mary's Hospital, had been rushing to get Emma ready for school while Gerard prepared for an important client presentation. In the chaos of breakfast and backpack checking, Sally had grabbed what she thought was Gerard's laptop bag and handed it to him at the door. "Don't forget your presentation files," she'd said, kissing him goodbye. "Thanks, hon. See you tonight," Gerard had replied, not bothering to check the bag as he headed out. It wasn't until 2 p.m., when Gerard reached for his laptop to review quarterly reports, that he realized the mistake. Instead of his sleek black briefcase, he'd been carrying Emma's bright purple backpack with cartoon unicorns dancing across the fabric. Gerard chuckled to himself, imagining Emma's confusion when she discovered she had his boring work bag instead of her school supplies. He unzipped the backpack to see what treasures his daughter had packed for second grade. What he found made him laugh out loud. 3 different colored pens, a half-eaten granola bar, a crumpled math worksheet with gold stars, and a small plastic container that looked like one of those pill organizers elderly people use for medication. Gerard picked up the container, smiling at Emma's organizational skills. She must have been keeping her vitamins sorted by day. "Hey, Stuart, come look at this," Gerard called to his colleague in the neighboring cubicle. Stuart Clements was a brilliant financial advisor who'd joined Meridian 2 years ago after an unexpected career change. Before numbers and portfolios, Stuart had spent 15 years as an emergency room physician at Denver General Hospital. Stuart rolled his chair over, his perpetually serious expression softening slightly. "What V you got there, Gerard?" "Emma's backpack got mixed up with my briefcase this morning. Look at this. My 7-year-old is more organized than half our clients." Gerard held up the pill organizer. "She's got her vitamins sorted by day of the week. Kids these days, right?" Stuart's face changed instantly. The mild amusement vanished, replaced by something Gerard had never seen before: raw, undiluted fear. Stuart's hands trembled as he took the container from Gerard's hands, his medical training kicking in as he examined it closely. "Gerard," Stuart's voice was barely a whisper, "where did Emma get this?" "What do you mean?" "It's just her vitamin organizer. Sally probably set it up for her." Stuart's face had gone completely ashen. He stood up abruptly, knocking his chair backward. "Gerard, listen to me very carefully. Drop everything you're doing. Get your daughter from school and drive to the hospital. Now." "What?" "Stuart, what's wrong? You're scaring me. If I tell you what I think this is, you'll freeze up and waste precious time. Just move. Get Emma and get to St. Mary's emergency room. Tell them Dr. Stuart Clements sent you and that it's a possible poisoning case. Do it now." Gerard had known Stuart for 2 years, and he'd never seen the man lose his composure. The urgency in his voice, the way his medical instincts had taken over, it sent ice through Gerard's veins. "I'm calling Sally," Gerard said, already reaching for his phone. "No time. Go. I'll call ahead to the hospital and explain." Gerard, run. Chapter 2. The Discovery. Gerard broke multiple speed limits getting to Emma's school. His hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles had turned white, and his mind raced through every possible scenario. What could be in that innocent-looking pill organizer that would make a former ER doctor react like that? Pine Ridge Elementary was in its afternoon dismissal routine when Gerard burst through the front doors. The secretary, Mrs. Patterson, looked up in surprise. "Mr. Baxter? Is everything all right? School doesn't end for another hour. I need to pick up Emma immediately. Family emergency." Mrs. Patterson must have seen something in his expression because she didn't ask any follow-up questions. Within 5 minutes, Emma was walking down the hallway, her small hand clutched in Gerard's larger one, confusion written across her face. "Daddy, why are you here?" Did I do something wrong? Gerard forced himself to stay calm as he buckled Emma into her car seat. No, sweetheart. Mommy needs us to meet her at the hospital where she works. Nothing's wrong. We just need to go there quickly. During the 15-minute drive to St. Mary's, Gerard called Sally. When she answered, he could hear the controlled chaos of the pediatric ward in the background. Gur? What's going on? Dr. Clements called here asking about Emma and something about poisoning. You're scaring me. I'll explain everything when I see you. Meet us in the emergency room. And Sally, bring whoever's in charge of toxicology. St. Mary's Hospital emergency room was a place Sally knew well, but seeing it from a parent's perspective sent chills down her spine. Gerard arrived with Emma just as Sally was walking through the automatic doors, her nurse's uniform still on from her shift. Mommy! Emma ran to Sally, who scooped her up despite the girl being almost too big to carry. What's this about? Sally asked Gerard, her professional nurse's demeanor fighting with her maternal panic. Gerard pulled the pill organizer from his jacket pocket. This was in Emma's backpack. Stuart took one look at it and told me to get her here immediately. Sally examined the container, her nursing experience immediately noting the careful organization and the way the pills were sorted. But like Gerard, she didn't see anything obviously dangerous. These look like children's vitamins, she said. The pink ones look like the gummy vitamins I give her every morning. Dr. Patricia Farrell, the head of emergency medicine, approached them. Sally had worked with her for 3 years and knew her as a no-nonsense physician who didn't waste time on false alarms. Mrs. Baxter, Dr. Clements called ahead. He's on his way here now, but he wanted us to start blood work immediately. Dr. Farrell knelt down to Emma's level. Hi there, sweetheart. We're going to do some quick tests to make sure you're feeling okay. I feel fine, Emma said, but she allowed herself to be led to a triage bed. The triage nurse, Janet Collier, was a veteran with 25 years of experience. She'd seen everything the ER could throw at her, but when Dr. Farrell handed her the pill organizer to examine, Janet's face went completely white. The busy emergency room seemed to pause. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Even the constant beeping of monitors seemed to quiet as Janet opened the container and examined its contents under a magnifying light. Dear God, Janet whispered, her voice carrying in the sudden silence. Dr. Farrell, these aren't vitamins. Gerard felt his world tilt on its axis. What are they? Dr. Farrell took the container and examined it herself, her expression growing more grave by the second. These are digoxin tablets, disguised to look like children's vitamins. Someone has been systematically poisoning your daughter. Chapter 3. The investigation begins. The next 6 hours passed in a blur of blood tests for lines and carefully controlled medical procedures. Emma, thankfully, was stable, but the blood work confirmed everyone's worst fears. She had dangerous levels of digoxin in her system, a heart medication that could be fatal in the wrong dosages, especially for a child. Gerard sat in the family consultation room with Sally, both of them trying to process what they'd learned. Dr. Farrell had explained that someone had been giving Emma small, carefully calculated doses over time, enough to make her occasionally tired and nauseous, but not enough to cause immediate collapse. Someone's been slowly poisoning our daughter for weeks, Sally said, her voice hollow. The mild symptoms we thought were just growing pains or tiredness from school. The nausea she complained about after lunch, Gerard added. We thought it was just cafeteria food. Stuart arrived at the hospital still wearing his work clothes, having driven straight from the office. His medical background had already kicked into overdrive, and he was coordinating with Dr. Farrell on Emma's treatment plan. The good news is we caught it in time, Stuart explained to Gerard and Sally. Digoxin poisoning is treatable if detected early. The bad news is that whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. This wasn't random, it was calculated, methodical. Detective Omar Ross from the city's Crimes Against Children unit arrived as Emma was being moved to a private room for overnight observation. Ross was a tall, imposing man with graying temples and eyes that had seen too much evil in his 20-year career. But he also had 2 daughters of his own, and cases involving children brought out his most determined side. Mr. and Mrs. Baxter, I need to ask you some difficult questions, Detective Ross said as they settled into the family room. Who has regular access to Emma's food, her belongings, her daily routine? Gerard ran through the list. Sally and I, obviously. Emma's teacher, Mrs. Wise. The school cafeteria staff. Her after-school babysitter, Francine Kemp. My mother-in-law, Minnie Herbert, who watches her some weekends. What about Emma's father? Detective Ross asked Sally directly. Gerard felt a flash of irritation. I am her father. Biological father, Ross clarified gently. I have to ask. Sally's expression darkened. Eugene McNamara. My ex-husband. But he hasn't seen Emma in over 2 years. The court ordered supervised visitation only after the incident. Gerard knew some of the story, but Sally had never shared all the details of her first marriage. He knew Eugene had been controlling and emotionally abusive, and that the divorce had been bitter. What he didn't know was why the court had restricted Eugene's access to Emma. What incident? Detective Ross asked. Sally looked at Gerard, then back at the detective. Eugene tried to kidnap Emma from her daycare 2 years ago. Said I was an unfit mother and that he was taking her somewhere safe. The police found them 6 hours later at a motel outside the city. Emma was terrified. Gerard felt anger building in his chest. In the 3 years he'd been married to Sally, Eugene had been nothing more than a distant shadow, an occasional angry phone call that Sally would handle privately, or a missed child support payment. Gerard had never considered him a real threat. Since then, Eugene's been unstable, Sally continued. He lost his job, started drinking heavily. The court requires any visits to be supervised at a family services center, but he hasn't shown up for one in 18 months. Detective Ross was taking detailed notes. Mrs. Baxter, I need you to think carefully. Has Eugene had any contact with Emma recently? Any way he could have accessed her food or belongings? No, I don't think so. We've been careful about that. What about indirect contact? Anyone who might be helping him? Gerard's analytical mind was already working through the possibilities. Detective, how would someone get access to prescription digoxin? That's not something you can just buy. Good question. Eugene McNamara, what's his background? Sally's face grew even paler. He's a pharmaceutical sales representative. Or was before he lost his job. He specialized in cardiac medications. The room fell silent. Detective Ross closed his notepad and stood up. Mr. and Mrs. Baxter, I'm going to be honest with you. This is all the hallmarks of a very serious crime. Someone with pharmaceutical knowledge has been systematically poisoning your daughter, likely as part of a larger plan. We need to move quickly. Stewart, who had been quietly listening, spoke up. Gerard, I think you and Sally need to consider the possibility that this isn't random. If Eugene has been planning something for 2 years, the poisoning might just be the beginning. Gerard looked at his wife, saw the fear in her eyes, and felt something cold and hard settle in his chest. Someone had tried to hurt Emma, his Emma, the little girl who called him daddy and drew him pictures of their family that he kept framed on his desk. Someone had been slowly poisoning her, making her sick, potentially planning something even worse. As he sat in that hospital room, watching his daughter sleep peacefully despite the 4 in her small arm, Gerard Baxter made a decision. The law would handle this their way, but Gerard would handle it his way. And his way wouldn't involve courts, lawyers, or second chances. Eugene McNamara had just made the biggest mistake of his life. Chapter 4. Uncovering the Truth. Over the next 3 days, while Emma recovered in the hospital under careful monitoring, Gerard threw himself into investigation mode. His background in financial analysis had taught him how to trace patterns, follow paper trails, and connect seemingly unrelated dots. Now, he was applying those skills to something far more personal and urgent. Detective Ross had been thorough, but was bound by legal procedures and bureaucratic red tape. Gerard had no such limitations. Working from Emma's hospital room during the day and from his home office at night, Gerard began building a comprehensive picture of Eugene McNamara's life over the past 2 years. What he discovered made his blood run cold. Eugene hadn't just been unstable. He'd been methodically planning something. Using his knowledge of database systems and his connections in the financial world, Gerard was able to trace Eugene's activities in ways the police couldn't immediately access. Eugene had been unemployed for 14 months, but his bank records showed regular small deposits from various pharmaceutical companies. Not salaries, but payments for consulting work. Gerard recognized the pattern. Eugene was selling information about drug inventory, shipment schedules, and security protocols to black market dealers. But more disturbing were Eugene's searches and purchases. Through a contact at a private investigation firm that Meridian Financial sometimes used for due diligence, Gerard obtained Eugene's internet history from the past 6 months. The searches painted a picture of a man obsessed with custody laws, parental rights, and increasingly, with ways to prove that Sally was an unfit mother. He's been planning to take Emma, Gerard told Sally on the third night, showing her printed copies of Eugene's online activity. Look at these searches: how to prove mother mentally unstable, custody rights for fathers, temporary guardianship laws. Sally stared at the papers, her nursing background helping her understand the medical implications. The poisoning, he wasn't trying to kill her. He was trying to make her sick enough that it would look like I was neglecting her health. Exactly. And look at this. Gerard showed her a series of searches from 3 weeks ago. Symptoms of child neglect, reporting suspected abuse, emergency custody procedures. The plan was diabolical in its simplicity. Eugene had been slowly poisoning Emma with carefully measured doses of digoxin, causing symptoms that could be attributed to poor parenting, fatigue, nausea, difficulty concentrating in school. When the symptoms became serious enough, he would anonymously report Sally to Child Protective Services, then swoop in as the concerned biological father demanding custody. There's more, Gerard said grimly. He pulled out another set of documents. Eugene's been in contact with a lawyer who specializes in emergency custody cases, and he's rented an apartment in Colorado under a false name. Sally's hands were shaking. He was going to disappear with her. Not if I have anything to say about it. Detective Ross arrived the next morning with official confirmation of what Gerard had already discovered through his own channels. We've got enough evidence to arrest Eugene McNamara on charges of child endangerment and attempted kidnapping. There's just one problem. We can't find him. What do you mean? Sally asked. He's disappeared. Cleared out of his apartment 3 days ago, right around the time you discovered the pills. Someone tipped him off. Gerard felt a chill run down his spine. How could he have known? Detective Ross looked uncomfortable. We're investigating that. But Mr. Baxter, I need to ask, who else knew about the discovery at the hospital? Gerard mentally reviewed everyone who had been present. The medical staff, Stewart themselves, and the babysitter, Francine Kemp. She called Sally asking if Emma was okay because Emma seemed tired during her last session. When was that? 2 days ago. Sally told her we were at the hospital running some tests. Detective Ross was already reaching for his phone. We need to bring in Francine Kemp for questioning. But when they arrived at Francine's address, they found another empty apartment. The landlord told them she'd given notice a week ago and moved out yesterday. This is bigger than we thought, Detective Ross said as they stood in the empty living room. Eugene didn't just have access to pharmaceutical supplies. He had inside help. Someone who could monitor Emma's daily routine. Someone trusted enough to be in your home. Gerard's analytical mind was working overtime. Francine's been our babysitter for 6 months. Sally found her through an agency that supposedly vetted their employees. I'm starting to think that agency might not be as legitimate as we believed, Sally said quietly. That evening, Gerard sat in Emma's hospital room while she slept, Sally having gone home to shower and bring back fresh clothes. Stewart had stopped by after work, and the two men sat in the dim room, discussing what they knew. Gerard, I've been thinking about this all day, Stewart said. I've seen a lot of cases in the ER, but this level of calculation is unusual. Eugene isn't just desperate, he's methodical. And if he's gone underground with help from others, he's not going to give up easily. What are you saying? I'm saying that even when the police find him, you need to be prepared for a long legal battle. And in the meantime, Emma's safety is at risk every day he's out there. Gerard looked at his sleeping daughter, her small chest rising and falling peacefully, the force still in her arm providing the antidote to the poison someone had been feeding her. In that moment, something hardened inside him. Stewart, You know I've never been a violent man. I know, but Emma is my daughter. Maybe not biologically, but in every way that matters. And someone tried to steal her from me by slowly poisoning her." Stuart nodded slowly. "The legal system isn't always justice, Gerard. Sometimes good people have to make hard choices." Gerard looked at his friend, recognizing something in Stuart's expression, the look of a man who had made difficult decisions before. "Tell me about your time in the ER. What do you want to know? You didn't just treat patients, did you? In 15 years, you must have seen cases where the system failed, where bad people got away with hurting children." Stuart was quiet for a long moment. "There were cases where we'd patch up a kid and send them home, knowing they'd be back in a few weeks. Cases where the evidence was there, but not strong enough for conviction. Cases where custody went to the wrong parent. What did you do?" "What I had to do." Gerard understood. Stuart hadn't just been a doctor. He'd been a guardian, someone who had taken matters into his own hands when the system failed to protect the innocent. "Eugene McNamara made a mistake when he chose my family to terrorize," Gerard said quietly. "He's about to learn that some people don't forgive, and they definitely don't forget." Chapter 5. The Network. While Emma continued her recovery, the digoxin levels in her system dropping daily, Gerard and Stuart began their own investigation into Eugene's network. What they discovered was more extensive and disturbing than either had imagined. Using Stuart's medical contacts and Gerard's financial analysis skills, they traced the fake babysitting agency that had placed Francine in their home. Heritage Home Care Services existed only on paper and online, but the company registration led them to a small office building in a rundown part of the city. "It's a front," Gerard explained to Detective Ross when they met at the police station. "The agency places babysitters in homes of divorced mothers, specifically targeting families where the ex-husband has lost custody. Then they gather intelligence for kidnapping attempts." Detective Ross spread out the documents Gerard had compiled. "This is impressive work, Mr. Baxter. How did you get access to all this?" "I have friends in financial services. We know how to trace money and corporate connections." What Gerard didn't mention was that some of his methods weren't entirely legal. With Stuart's help, he'd hacked into email accounts, intercepted phone records, and used social engineering techniques to extract information from unwitting sources. The network they'd uncovered was shocking in its scope. Eugene wasn't working alone. He was part of a larger operation run by a man named Philip Skinner, a disbarred lawyer who specialized in helping divorced fathers circumvent custody laws through intimidation, fraud, and worse. Skinner's operation had been active for at least 3 years, with more than a dozen successful kidnappings disguised as legitimate custody disputes. The pattern was always the same: identify divorced mothers with stable new relationships, place infiltrators in their homes through fake service agencies, then systematically undermine the mother's credibility through manufactured evidence of neglect or abuse. They target women like Sally specifically, Gerard explained to Detective Ross. Single mothers who remarried, have stable jobs, and whose ex-husbands have lost custody. They make these women look unfit. Then the biological father swoops in as the hero. And if the biological father doesn't want to pay for the full service, they offer a cheaper option, like systematically poisoning the child to create evidence of medical neglect. Detective Ross closed the file. "Mr. Baxter, this information is incredible, but I have to ask, how did you obtain some of these documents? Some of this looks like it came from private email accounts and phone records." Gerard met the detective's gaze steadily. "I used the same techniques I used to investigate potential fraud in investment portfolios. All perfectly legal research methods." It wasn't entirely true, but Gerard had been careful to keep Stuart's involvement minimal and to ensure that any evidence they'd obtained illegally was backed up by information that could be legally acquired. That night, Gerard sat in his home office while Sally slept upstairs. Emma was finally home from the hospital, and they'd installed a sophisticated security system that Gerard had arranged through his company's corporate security contacts. But Gerard wasn't satisfied with defense. Eugene and his network had tried to destroy his family, and they were still out there, probably targeting other families. The police would eventually catch them, but that could take months or years. And in the meantime, how many other children would suffer? Gerard opened his laptop and began planning. His financial analysis background had taught him that every system had vulnerabilities. You just had to know where to look and how to exploit them. Philip Skinner's operation was extensive, but it was also a business. And businesses had cash flows, dependencies, and pressure points. Over the next week, while publicly cooperating with the police investigation, Gerard began systematically dismantling Skinner's network from the inside. He started with the financial infrastructure. Using techniques he'd learned for investigating corporate fraud, Gerard traced the money flows that kept Skinner's operation running. He identified the bank accounts, the shell companies, the property rentals, and the payment systems that allowed the network to function. Then he began to sabotage them. The first step was the fake agencies. Gerard anonymously reported Heritage Home Care Services and 3 other front companies to state licensing authorities, providing detailed evidence of fraud. Within 48 hours, all 4 agencies had their licenses revoked and their assets frozen. Next came the money. Gerard had discovered that Skinner was using cryptocurrency to pay his network of infiltrators and corrupt officials. Using advanced techniques he'd learned for tracking international money laundering, Gerard identified the digital wallets and began systematically disrupting the payment system. But the most important discovery came when Gerard hacked into Philip Skinner's personal email account. What he found there changed everything. Chapter 6. The Deeper Conspiracy. The emails in Philip Skinner's account revealed a conspiracy that extended far beyond what Gerard had imagined. Skinner wasn't just running a custody manipulation scheme. He was part of a much larger operation that involved corrupt family court judges, falsified psychological evaluations, and a network of professionals who were systematically stealing children from protective mothers. Judge Francisco Morse had been taking payments to rule in favor of abusive fathers. Dr. Anna Mead, a court-appointed child psychologist, had been providing false evaluations that painted loving mothers as mentally unstable. Lawyer Nelson Sanford had been coaching abusive ex-husbands on how to manipulate the system. And at the center of it all was Philip Skinner coordinating everything like a criminal mastermind. Gerard printed out every email, every financial transaction, every piece of evidence he could find. But as he read through the communications, he realized something that made his blood boil. Emma wasn't Eugene's first target. Over the past 3 years, Eugene had participated in 4 other cases. For other families destroyed, for other children traumatized, for other mothers whose lives had been shattered by this network of corruption. One of the cases particularly caught Gerard's attention. The file on Stephanie Hunt, a nurse from Portland whose ex-husband had gained custody of their daughter through fabricated evidence of drug abuse. The emails showed that Stephanie had fought the decision, hired private investigators, and eventually uncovered part of the conspiracy. The last email about Stephanie Hunt was dated 6 months ago. The subject line read, "Problem solved permanently." Gerard's hands trembled as he clicked on the email. Philip Skinner's message to Eugene was brief. Stephanie Hunt will no longer be pursuing her appeals. Car accident last Tuesday. Very sad. These mountain roads can be so dangerous. Gerard stared at the screen, understanding the implication. They hadn't just stolen children. They had murdered anyone who got too close to exposing them. And now Gerard was getting close. He immediately called Stuart, despite the late hour. "Stuart, I need you to come over right now. And bring whatever you use to carry for protection when you worked late night ER shifts." "Gerard, what's wrong?" "I found something, and I think we're all in danger." Stuart arrived 30 minutes later, carrying a small duffel bag that Gerard suspected contained more than medical supplies. They sat in Gerard's home office while Sally and Emma slept upstairs, and Gerard shared what he discovered. "We need to go to the police with this immediately," Stuart said after reading through the evidence. "With what? Illegally obtained emails that would be thrown out of court? Information gathered through computer hacking? Stuart, even if this evidence was admissible, it would take years to prosecute everyone involved. Judge Morse is still on the bench making custody decisions. Dr. Mead is still evaluating families. And while we're waiting for justice, how many more children are going to suffer?" Stuart was quiet for a long moment. "What are you proposing?" "I'm proposing we handle this the way it should be handled. Quickly, efficiently, and permanently. Gerard, you're talking about taking the law into your own hands. I'm talking about protecting my family and making sure these people never hurt another child. Stuart looked at his friend, recognizing the cold determination in Gerard's eyes. It was the same look he'd seen in his own mirror years ago, when a legal system had failed a child who'd come through his ER doors one too many times. What do you need me to do? Gerard smiled for the first time in days, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. I need you to help me plan the most comprehensive takedown these people have ever seen. By the time we're finished, Philip Skinner's network is going to wish they'd never heard the name Emma Baxter. The two men spent the rest of the night planning. Gerard's analytical mind mapped out every connection, every vulnerability, every pressure point in network. Stuart's medical knowledge provided insights into methods and timing. Together, they designed a plan that would systematically destroy everyone involved while ensuring that Gerard's family remained safe. But as dawn broke over the city, Gerard realized they had one more problem to solve. Eugene McNamara was still out there, still free, and according to the emails Gerard had intercepted, he was planning one final desperate attempt to take Emma. The emails indicated that Eugene blamed Gerard for stealing his family and was no longer content with legal manipulation. He was planning something direct, something violent, and something that would happen soon. Gerard closed his laptop and looked at Stuart. Change of plans. We're not just taking down the network. We're going to use it to trap Eugene first. Ow! Gerard's smile was sharp and cold. We're going to give him exactly what he wants. We're going to make him think he's won. Chapter 7. The Trap. 2 weeks later, Gerard and Sally put their plan into motion. To the outside world, it appeared that the stress of Emma's poisoning and the police investigation had taken its toll on their marriage. They began arguing publicly, loudly enough for neighbors to hear. Gerard moved into a hotel temporarily, making sure to complain to anyone who would listen about Sally's overprotectiveness and paranoia. The performance was designed to reach Eugene through the network of informants that Gerard had identified in Philip Skinner's emails. Within days, word had spread through the underground channels that the Baxter family was fracturing. Meanwhile, Detective Ross was working with federal authorities to build cases against Judge Morse and Dr. Meade based on the evidence Gerard had provided. But Gerard had been careful to present it as information discovered through his financial investigation techniques, leaving out the illegal hacking. The real plan was much more sophisticated. Gerard had spent 2 weeks studying Eugene's psychological profile, built from their surveillance of his communications, his spending patterns, and his behavior history. Eugene was narcissistic, impulsive, and believed himself smarter than everyone around him. Most importantly, he was impatient. The fake marital problems were designed to make Eugene think his opportunity had finally arrived. If Gerard and Sally were fighting, if their marriage was unstable, if Sally appeared overwhelmed and distracted, then Eugene could position himself as the stable alternative parent. Gerard's move to the Riverside Hotel wasn't random. The hotel was located exactly 12 minutes from Emma's school and had security cameras covering every entrance. More importantly, Gerard had spent a week befriending the hotel staff and arranging for additional surveillance that Eugene wouldn't detect. On a Thursday afternoon, exactly 2 weeks after Gerard had moved into the hotel, Eugene made his move. Gerard was sitting in the hotel restaurant, openly drinking and appearing disheveled, when Stuart called. He's taken the bait. Black Ford Explorer, license plate matching the description you provided. He's been sitting across from Emma's school for the past hour. Gerard felt his pulse quicken, but his voice remained steady. Is everyone in position? Detective Ross and his team are 2 blocks away. The school has been notified. Sally's inside with Emma, and they're ready to move to the safe room if needed. And our backup plan? Stuart's voice was grim. Ready if the police plan fails. Gerard had learned from Stephanie Hunt's case that legal justice wasn't always guaranteed. If Eugene somehow escaped police custody or the charges didn't stick, Gerard was prepared to implement a more permanent solution. At 3:15 p.m., as children began filing out of Pine Ridge Elementary, Eugene McNamara stepped out of his vehicle. He was carrying a bouquet of flowers and walking toward the school entrance with the confident stride of a man who believed he was finally getting what he deserved. He made it exactly 50 feet before Detective Ross and 4 officers surrounded him. But as Gerard watched from his hotel room through binoculars, he noticed something that made his blood run cold. Eugene wasn't surprised by the arrest. He was smiling. Gerard's phone rang. It was an unknown number. Mr. Baxter. The voice was cultured, confident, and completely unfamiliar. This is Philip Skinner. I believe we need to talk. Chapter 8. Face to Face. The meeting location was neutral ground, a public park near downtown, with plenty of witnesses and escape routes. Gerard arrived early, positioning himself on a bench with clear sight lines in all directions. Stewart was 50 yards away, pretending to jog, with a clear view of the entire area. Philip Skinner arrived exactly on time. He was a small, well-dressed man in his 50s, with the kind of confident bearing that suggested he was used to being the smartest person in the room. He sat down next to Gerard, as if they were old friends meeting for a casual conversation. "Mr. Baxter, you've been busy," Skinner said without preamble. "Impressive work, really. The way you traced our financial networks, identified our operational structure, even managed to provide the police with evidence while covering your own illegal methods. Quite sophisticated." Gerard kept his expression neutral. "I don't know what you're talking about." Skinner laughed. "Please, I know you hack my emails. I know you've been systematically sabotaging my operation for the past 2 weeks. And I know you're responsible for the federal investigation that's currently dismantling 3 years of careful work. If you know all that, why are you here instead of running?" "Because, Mr. Baxter, you've made a fundamental error in judgment. You've assumed that arresting Eugene would end this. But Eugene was just an employee, a desperate, unstable employee who was always destined to be caught eventually." Gerard felt ice forming in his stomach. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that your daughter is still in danger. You've disrupted my network, yes, but you haven't eliminated the demand for my services. There are dozens of men like Eugene out there, and they're willing to pay handsomely for results." Skinner reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a tablet. On the screen was a live video feed of Emma's classroom at Pine Ridge Elementary. "Ow! Did you really think we only had one person inside your circle?" Francine was obvious, meant to be discovered. She was never the real threat. Gerard's mind raced through the possibilities. Who else had access to Emma? Who else had they trusted? "Mrs. Wise," Gerard said, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. "Emma's teacher. Cara Wise has been feeding us information about your family for 4 months, Mr. Baxter. She knows Emma's schedule, her habits, her fears. She's been preparing Emma psychologically for the transition to her real daddy." Gerard's hands clenched into fists. "What do you want?" "I want you to understand that this isn't over. Arresting Eugene was a temporary setback, but the demand for our services hasn't decreased. In fact, your interference has made Emma a particularly valuable target. Other clients see her as a challenge, a proof of concept. You're threatening my daughter. I'm explaining reality. You can continue your crusade against my network, and we'll continue to adapt and evolve. Meanwhile, Emma remains at risk every day she's in that school, every moment she's out of your sight." Skinner stood up to leave, but Gerard grabbed his arm. "Wait, what would it take for this to end? What would make you leave my family alone?" Skinner smiled coldly. "Nothing you'd be willing to do, Mr. Baxter. You're a good man, a law-abiding citizen. You work within the system. But the system can't protect Emma from people like me. Try me." Skinner studied Gerard's face carefully. "There might be one way, but it would require you to become something you're not. Something your wife might not recognize." "Explain." "My operation succeeds because it's invisible. We operate in shadows. We corrupt systems from within, and we disappear when threatened. But what if someone with your skills, your financial expertise, your analytical mind, your insider access to legitimate institutions? What if someone like that decided to build a competing network?" Gerard stared at him. "You want me to join you? I want you to replace me. Take over my operation, redirect it toward legitimate custody cases, help fathers who actually deserve their children instead of abusers and kidnappers. Clean house from the inside. And if I refuse?" Then Emma remains a target. Not just from Eugene, from every desperate father who sees her as the prize that proves our methods work. Skinner walked away, leaving Gerard alone on the bench with a terrible choice. Join the network that had tried to destroy his family, or spend the rest of his life looking over his shoulder, knowing that his daughter would never be truly safe. That evening, Gerard explained the situation to Sally and Stuart. They sat in their living room, Emma safely asleep upstairs, while Gerard outlined Skinner's proposal. "He's right about one thing," Stuart said grimly. "As long as the demand exists, someone will fill it. Taking down Skinner just creates a power vacuum." But joining them? Sally was horrified. "Gerard, these people try to kill our daughter, and they'll try again unless we control the situation. Sally, if I take over Skinner's network, I can dismantle it from the inside. I can protect Emma and help other families at the same time. Or you could become the very thing you're fighting against." Gerard looked at his wife, understanding her fear. But he also understood something else. Sometimes good people had to make impossible choices to protect what mattered most. "There's another option," Stuart said quietly. "One that doesn't involve joining them or waiting for them to strike again." "What?" Stuart's expression was calm, but his eyes were hard. "We end this permanently. All of them. Tonight." Chapter 8. The Reckoning. The plan they developed was elegant in its simplicity and devastating in its execution. Gerard had spent weeks mapping Philip Skinner's network, identifying every player, every location, and every vulnerability. Now he would use that knowledge to orchestrate their downfall. Stuart's medical background provided the key insight. Skinner's operation depends on coordination and communication. Take out the communication network, and the whole system collapses. They started with Mrs. Cara Wise, Emma's teacher who had been feeding information to the network. Gerard had discovered that she was deeply in debt due to her gambling addiction, debts that Skinner had been paying in exchange for her cooperation. Rather than expose her immediately, Gerard offered her a choice during a private meeting after school hours. "Mrs. Wise, I know about your arrangement with Philip Skinner," Gerard said, sitting across from her in her empty classroom. "I also know about your gambling debts, your financial situation, and the hold Skinner has over you." Cara Wise had always been a nervous woman, but now she looked terrified. "Mr. Baxter, I never meant for Emma to get hurt. I just provided information about schedules and routines. I didn't know they were going to poison her." "But you suspected something was wrong, didn't you? You noticed Emma's symptoms getting worse." Tears began flowing down her face. "I thought maybe she was just tired. Kids get tired. I didn't know." Gerard leaned forward. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to call Philip Skinner and tell him that I've agreed to meet with him tonight. You're going to give him the address I specify, and you're going to convince him that I'm ready to negotiate. And if I refuse?" Gerard placed a manila folder on the desk between them. "Then Detective Ross receives this complete documentation of your involvement in child endangerment, fraud, and conspiracy. You'll lose your teaching license, face criminal charges, and still owe money to some very dangerous people. And if I cooperate, then you disappear. Tonight, I've arranged for debt forgiveness and a teaching position in Oregon under a new identity. You start over. You never contact anyone from your old life, and you spend the rest of your career actually protecting children instead of helping people hurt them." Cara Wise stared at the folder, then at Gerard. "Why are you offering me this?" "Because unlike Skinner and his people, I don't believe in destroying people who were manipulated into bad situations. But this is your only chance, Mrs. Wise. Take it or face the consequences." An hour later, Cara Wise made the phone call to Philip Skinner, reading from a script Gerard had provided. The meeting was set for 11 p.m. at an abandoned warehouse that Gerard had selected specifically for its isolation and its security camera blind spots. While Cara Wise boarded a bus to Oregon with a new ID and a fresh start, Gerard and Stuart prepared for the most dangerous part of their plan. "You know, this could go very wrong," Stuart said as they checked their equipment in Gerard's garage. "Skinner's not stupid. He might suspect a trap. He'll suspect a trap, but his ego won't let him believe I could outsmart him. Men like Skinner think they're always the smartest person in the room." Gerard's preparation was meticulous. He'd studied Skinner's psychological profile, his business methods, and his operational patterns. Skinner was a controller who relied on manipulation and intimidation, but he was also a coward who had never faced direct physical confrontation. The warehouse Gerard had chosen was one that Meridian Financial had used for storage before moving to a larger facility. Gerard knew the layout intimately, had keys to all the entrances, and had spent the past week installing his own surveillance and communication equipment. At 10:45 p.m., Gerard was in position inside the warehouse, monitoring the approaches through hidden cameras. Stewart was positioned outside with a rifle and a clear line of sight to the main entrance, backup in case things went wrong. Philip Skinner arrived exactly on time, but he didn't come alone. 3 men accompanied him, all carrying weapons and moving with the practiced confidence of professional criminals. Gerard's earpiece crackled with Stewart's voice, for targets, all armed. This isn't a negotiation, it's an execution. Gerard had expected this. Skinner had never intended to negotiate. He'd come to eliminate the threat Gerard represented, just as he'd eliminated Stephanie Hunt. But Gerard had been planning for this scenario. Phase 2, Gerard whispered into his microphone. The warehouse suddenly filled with blinding light as Gerard activated the high-power construction lights he'd installed throughout the space. At the same time, speakers hidden in the rafters began broadcasting a deafeningly loud alarm sound. Skinner and his men were temporarily disoriented, exactly as Gerard had planned. But Gerard had spent weeks practicing in this space with the lights and noise, and he moved through the warehouse like a ghost. The first man went down to a taser Gerard had modified for extended range. The second fell into a pit Gerard had covered with a tarp, landing 12 feet down on concrete. Skinner and the remaining gunmen took cover behind some old equipment, trying to locate Gerard in the chaos of lights and sound. "Baxter," Skinner shouted over the noise. "You're making a mistake. You can't win this. We have people everywhere." Gerard's voice seemed to come from all directions, amplified by the speaker system. "You're right, Skinner. I can't win this through legal channels. But I don't need legal channels. I just need you." The psychological warfare was deliberate. Gerard wanted Skinner afraid, confused, and making mistakes. The turning point came when Stewart's voice crackled through Gerard's earpiece. "Gerard, you need to know. Emma's school just called Sally. There's been an incident. Someone tried to break into the building tonight." Gerard felt ice in his veins. This wasn't Skinner's only play. It was a distraction. While Gerard was focused on the warehouse confrontation, another team was going after Emma directly. "Stewart, get to my house now. Sally and Emma are supposed to be at your apartment. But if someone's at the school..." Gerard's planning shifted into overdrive. He activated the final phase of his warehouse trap. Automated systems that would contain Skinner and his remaining man until police arrived, triggered by Gerard's remote signal. But first, he had to deal with the immediate threat. Gerard emerged from the shadows, no longer hiding, no longer playing games. In his hand was a pistol he'd acquired through Stewart's contacts, and his expression was completely calm. "Philip Skinner," Gerard said, his voice cutting through the alarm noise. "You have 10 seconds to call off whatever team you sent to my home, or I start shooting." Chapter 9. Justice Served. The standoff in the warehouse lasted exactly 43 seconds. Philip Skinner, faced with Gerard's unwavering resolve and the realization that his distraction tactic had been discovered, made the call to abort the home invasion. But Gerard wasn't satisfied with just stopping the immediate threat. "Now you're going to call every person in your network and tell them the operation is permanently shut down," Gerard said, keeping the pistol trained on Skinner. "You're going to transfer control of all financial accounts to a foundation I've established for protecting abused children. And you're going to provide testimony against every corrupt official you've been paying. And if I refuse..." Gerard's smile was arctic. "Then you'll join Stephanie Hunt." Skinner's confident facade finally cracked. "You can't prove anything about Stephanie Hunt. I don't need to prove it to a court. I just need to prove it to the people who cared about her." Gerard activated his phone speaker and placed a call. The voice that answered was female, young, and angry. "Is this?" And the voice asked. "This is Philip Skinner," Gerard confirmed. "The man responsible for your mother's death." Skinner's face went white as he recognized the implications. Gerard had contacted Stephanie Hunt's daughter, now 18 and legally an adult, and provided her with the evidence of Skinner's involvement in her mother's murder. "Mr. Skinner," the young woman's voice was steady despite her obvious emotion. "My name is Jennifer Hunt. You killed my mother to cover up your criminal operation. I've been waiting 2 years to find the people responsible. You can't prove. I don't need to prove anything. I have money, I have time, and I have nothing left to lose. If Mr. Baxter doesn't get justice for my mother, I will. And I won't be as civilized about it as he's being." The psychological pressure was overwhelming. Skinner found himself trapped between Gerard's immediate physical threat, the legal consequences of Gerard's evidence, and the promise of long-term vengeance from Stephanie Hunt's daughter. He broke. Over the next hour, Skinner provided detailed confessions about his entire operation. He gave up the names of every corrupt official, every infiltrator, every client who had paid for children to be stolen from their mothers. He transferred control of his financial assets to Gerard's foundation and provided passwords to encrypted communications that would allow authorities to unravel 3 years of criminal activity. When Detective Ross arrived with backup officers, they found Philip Skinner and his associates secured and ready for transport, along with a comprehensive package of evidence that would ensure convictions for everyone involved. But Gerard's justice went beyond legal consequences. Over the following weeks, as news of the conspiracy broke nationwide, Gerard used his financial expertise and the resources he'd seized from Skinner's operation to implement a different kind of punishment. Judge Francisco Morse found his personal investments wiped out overnight, his pension fund emptied through carefully orchestrated financial manipulation. Dr. Anami discovered that her professional licenses had been revoked in every state due to anonymous reports of ethical violations backed by meticulous documentation. Lawyer Nelson Sanford's practice collapsed when his client list was leaked to authorities, revealing his involvement in dozens of fraudulent custody cases. Eugene McNamara, facing federal charges for child endangerment and conspiracy, found that his legal troubles were the least of his problems. Gerard had systematically destroyed his ability to function in society, his credit destroyed, his employment prospects eliminated, his reputation ruined in every community where he might try to start over. But Gerard's masterpiece was what he did with Philip Skinner's assets. The Stephanie Hunt Foundation, established with money seized from Skinner's operation, became a national organization dedicated to protecting mothers and children from custody manipulation. Within 6 months, it had helped reunite 12 families that had been destroyed by Skinner's network and provided legal support for dozens more. Eugene served 4 years in federal prison. When he was released, he found a world where Gerard Baxter's influence made it impossible for him to rebuild his life. Every job application was rejected, every apartment rental denied, every attempt to start fresh blocked by the comprehensive blacklisting Gerard had arranged. 5 years later, Gerard sat in his home office, reviewing quarterly reports for the foundation that had grown into a multi-million-dollar organization. Emma, now 12 years old, was doing homework at the kitchen table, healthy, happy, and completely unaware of how close she'd come to being stolen from the family that loved her. Sally appeared in the doorway with coffee for both of them. "The Hunt Foundation just got approval for the new legislation," she said, settling into the chair across from Gerard's desk. "Mandatory psychological evaluations for all family court personnel, enhanced background checks for child care providers, and federal oversight of custody decisions in domestic abuse cases." Gerard smiled, remembering the terrified little girl in the hospital bed with an 4-drip flushing poison from her system. That experience had taught him that sometimes the most important battles weren't fought in courtrooms or through official channels. Sometimes justice required good people to become something harder, something more dangerous than the threats they faced. "Any word on Eugene?" Gerard asked. "He was arrested again last week. Attempted burglary in Nevada. 3rd strike. He's looking at life under their 3 strikes law." Gerard nodded, feeling a deep satisfaction. Eugene McNamara had spent 5 years learning that there were consequences for threatening Gerard Baxter's family. Now he would spend the rest of his life remembering that lesson. Emma's laughter drifted in from the kitchen as she worked on her math homework, the sound of a child who felt safe and loved in her home. Gerard closed the foundation reports and walked into the kitchen, where his daughter was waiting for help with fractions. As he sat down beside her, Emma looked up with the bright smile that had made him a father the day he'd married Sally. "Daddy, Mrs. Johnson says I'm the best at math in my whole class." "That's because you're brilliant, sweetheart, just like your mom." Gerard helped Emma with her homework, listened to her stories about her friends, and tucked her into bed with the usual routine of stories and songs. To any observer, he was simply a devoted father enjoying a quiet evening with his family. But Gerard Baxter was more than that now. He was a protector, a guardian who had learned that sometimes love required darkness, that sometimes justice required methods the law couldn't sanction. Philip Skinner's network was gone. Eugene McNamara was destroyed, and Emma Baxter was safe. For Gerard, that was victory enough. But in his home office, locked in a safe that only he could access, Gerard kept detailed files on dozens of other cases. Other children at risk, other families being targeted, other corrupt networks that thought they were untouchable. The Stephanie Hunt Foundation was his public face, his legal method of protecting families. But Gerard Baxter's real work happened in the shadows, where good men did terrible things to ensure that innocent children could sleep safely in their beds. And there you have it. And he was very good at it. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there. Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Birthday Humiliation. Alex Johnson had always prided himself on being a patient man. 20 years in the military had taught him the value of calculated restraint, of observing before acting. But as he watched his 8-year-old son Tommy's face crumble at the sight of his birthday cake, Alex felt something cold and final settle in his chest. Sarah Johnson stood in the kitchen doorway, her blonde hair perfectly styled despite the early morning hour, watching their son with barely concealed amusement. The cake she presented was clearly dog food, chunks of brown meat and vegetables molded into a rough cake shape with a single candle stuck in the center. "It's just a joke," Sarah laughed, her voice carrying that particular edge it had developed over the past year. "Come on, Tommy, where's your sense of humor?" Alex's father, Ralph Johnson, held up his phone, recording everything with the enthusiasm of a man who'd found the perfect story for his weekly poker game. At 72, Ralph had never been one to show affection to his only grandchild, but this seemed particularly cruel even for him. "This is priceless," Ralph chuckled, adjusting his angle to get Tommy's tears in frame. "Wait until the boys at the VFW see this." Margie Johnson, Alex's mother, stood beside her husband, her arms crossed and a smirk playing at her lips. "He's used to eating trash anyway," she said with a laugh. "I've seen what Sarah packs in his lunch." The words hit Alex like a physical blow, but not because they were unexpected. His mother had always favored Sarah over him, had always made it clear that she thought his wife was too good for him. What shocked him was the casual cruelty directed at Tommy, his innocent son who was already struggling with being the smallest kid in his grade. Alex said nothing, just smiled. The same smile he'd worn when enemy combatants had thought they'd gotten the better of him in Afghanistan. The same smile that had preceded some of his most decisive victories. Tommy ran from the room, his small footsteps echoing up the stairs, followed by the slam of his bedroom door. Sarah shrugged and began preparing her real breakfast, Greek yogurt and granola, the same pristine meal she'd eaten every morning for the past 3 years. "You could have at least waited until after school," Alex said quietly, his voice carrying no emotion. "Oh, please," Sarah rolled her eyes. "It's not like he won't get over it. Kids are resilient. Besides, maybe this will toughen him up a little. He's too soft." Ralph lowered his phone, finally stopping the recording. "Your wife's got a point, Alex. The boy needs some backbone. When you were his age, we would have laughed right along with a joke like that." Alex remembered being 8 years old. He remembered his parents' idea of humor, their casual cruelty disguised as character building. He'd sworn his own children would never experience that. Yet here they were, 3 generations of Johnsons, and nothing had changed. "I'm going to check on Tommy," Alex said, heading toward the stairs. "Don't coddle him," Sarah called after him. "He needs to learn that the world isn't going to hand him everything on a silver platter." Alex paused at the bottom of the stairs, his hand gripping the banister. Sarah had no idea what the world had handed Alex, what he'd fought for, what he'd earned through blood and determination. She had no idea what he was capable of when pushed too far. He found Tommy face down on his bed, his small body shaking with quiet sobs. Alex sat on the edge of the bed and placed a gentle hand on his son's back. "I'm sorry about that, buddy," Alex said softly. "That wasn't right." Tommy turned over, his face red and streaked with tears. "Why did Mom do that? It's my birthday." Alex felt something fundamental shift inside him. Looking at his son's confused, hurt expression, he realized that this moment would define everything that came after. Tommy would remember this birthday for the rest of his life. He'd remember how his mother had humiliated him, how his grandparents had laughed, and how his father had responded. "Sometimes adults make bad choices," Alex said carefully. "But I want you to know that what happened downstairs wasn't about you. You didn't do anything wrong. Is Mom going to make me a real cake?" Alex pulled his son into a hug, breathing in the scent of his shampoo, feeling the delicate bones of his shoulders. "I'll make sure you get the birthday you deserve," he promised. "I'll handle everything." After Tommy had calmed down and Alex had helped him get ready for school, Alex returned downstairs to find Sarah on her phone, laughing at something on the screen. His parents had left, but Ralph's words echoed in his mind. "This is priceless." "Sarah," Alex said quietly. She didn't look up from her phone. "What? Who were you texting?" Now she glanced up, her expression shifting to mild annoyance. "Just a friend." "What?" Alex had been married to Sarah for 10 years. He knew her tells, her micro-expressions, the way her voice changed when she was lying. He also knew that she'd been increasingly distant over the past year, increasingly critical of both him and Tommy. He'd attributed it to stress from her job at the marketing firm, but now he wondered if there was more to it. "Nothing," he said, maintaining that same calm smile. "I just wanted to know if you were sharing the video of our son's humiliation with anyone else." Sarah's cheeks flushed slightly. "It was just funny, Alex." "God, you're so sensitive. It's not like I posted it on social media or anything." But she had shared it with someone she was comfortable enough with to send a video of their family's private moment. Someone who would appreciate the humor in a child's disappointment. "I'm going to pick up a real cake for Tommy after work," Alex said. "Fine," Sarah shrugged. "Waste the money. But don't expect me to pretend it's some grand gesture." The joke was harmless. Alex nodded and headed to the garage. As he drove to work, he thought about his son's tears, his wife's casual cruelty, his parents' laughter. He thought about the life he'd built, the family he'd tried to protect, the woman he'd trusted with his heart and his child's well-being. By the time he reached his office at the construction company he'd built from nothing after leaving the military, Alex had made a decision. Some betrayals were too deep to forgive. Some wounds were too deliberate to heal. He'd spent 20 years learning patience in the military, but he'd also learned something else: how to plan, how to execute, and how to win when winning mattered most. Sarah and whoever she was texting had no idea what they'd set in motion with their cruel joke, but they would learn. Chapter 2: The Discovery. Alex Johnson's construction company, Apex Building Solutions, occupied a modest office complex on the industrial side of town. He'd built it from the ground up after his military discharge, leveraging his engineering background and leadership experience into a thriving business that specialized in high-end residential projects. The work was honest, profitable, and provided him with the resources to give his family a comfortable life. More importantly, it had taught him how to investigate. In construction, you learned to spot problems before they became disasters. You developed an eye for structural weaknesses, for signs that something wasn't built to last. You learned to ask the right questions and verify every detail, because people's lives depended on your thoroughness. As Alex sat in his office that afternoon, he applied those same skills to his marriage. Sarah's phone records were easy enough to access. They shared a family plan, and Alex was the primary account holder. What he found made his jaw tighten with something that went beyond anger into a realm of cold, calculating fury. Hundreds of texts over the past 8 months to a number registered to Brett Young. The frequency had increased dramatically in recent weeks, with exchanges happening at all hours of the day and night. The content preview function showed fragments. "Can't wait to see you. He's so clueless. Soon we won't have to hide anymore." Alex pulled up Brett Young's social media profiles. 34 years old, fitness instructor at Elite Fitness downtown, divorced with no children. His Instagram was full of shirtless photos, motivational quotes about living authentically, and comments from women that made it clear he had quite a following. But it was a photo from 3 weeks ago that made Alex's blood run cold. Brett Young and Sarah Johnson, clearly taken at some upscale restaurant. Her hand resting on his arm, both of them gazing at each other with the intensity of new lovers. Sarah was wearing the dress Alex had bought her for their anniversary last year. The caption read, "When you find someone who makes you laugh until your stomach hurts." #blessed #new chapter. Alex scrolled through the comments. Several people had congratulated them on their relationship, calling them a perfect couple, asking when they were going to make it official. One comment from a woman named Desiree Kern made Alex's chest tighten. "Sarah's so lucky to have found someone who appreciates her sense of humor. That video you sent was hilarious." So the video of Tommy's humiliation had been shared. His son's pain had become entertainment for Sarah's new social circle. Alex spent the next hour conducting a thorough background check on Brett Young. Military training had its benefits. Alex still maintained contacts in various agencies, and a few discreet phone calls revealed interesting information. Brett had been fired from 2 previous gyms for inappropriate relationships with married clients. He was currently 3 months behind on his car payments and had recently taken out a high-interest personal loan for $15,000. Most interesting of all, Brett Young had been asking questions about Alex's business. According to Alex's contact at the bank, Brett had attempted to get information about Apex Building Solutions' financial status, claiming to be a potential investor. The bank had, of course, refused to provide any details, but it painted a clear picture of Brett's intentions. Alex leaned back in his chair, processing the information. This wasn't just an affair born of passion or emotional connection. Brett Young was a predator who targeted wealthy married women, and Sarah had walked right into his trap. But instead of feeling sorry for his wife, Alex felt something colder. Sarah had chosen this. She'd chosen to humiliate their son, to betray their marriage, to destroy their family for a man who saw her as nothing more than a paycheck. His phone buzzed with a text from Sarah, "Working late tonight. Don't wait up." Alex smiled that same calm smile from the morning. He typed back, "No problem. Take your time." Then he made a series of phone calls. The first was to his lawyer, Ian Brennan, who'd handled the legal aspects of Alex's business for years. Ian was discreet, thorough, and had a reputation for aggressive representation when needed. "Ian, I need to discuss some personal matters," Alex said when the lawyer answered. "Hypothetically, what would be the best way to protect my assets if I were facing a divorce?" "That's an interesting hypothetical," Ian replied carefully. "How time-sensitive is this hypothetical situation?" "Very." "I see. Well, hypothetically, the sooner we act, the better positioned you'd be. There are several strategies we could employ, but timing is crucial. How confident are you that divorce is inevitable?" Alex thought about Tommy's tears, about Sarah's cruel laughter, about the casual way she'd shared their son's humiliation with her lover. "Completely confident. Then I'd suggest we meet tomorrow morning. Bring all your financial documents, and we'll discuss your options." Hypothetically, of course. The second call was to Stuart Peters, a private investigator Alex had met through business connections. Stuart was ex-FBI, methodical, and completely uninterested in moral judgments. He dealt in facts and evidence. "Stuart, I need comprehensive surveillance on 2 individuals," Alex said. "I need to know everything, where they go, who they see, what they do. I need it all documented with timestamps and photographs. Time frame, starting immediately, ongoing until I say stop." "Understood. Send me the details, and I'll have a team in place by tonight." The third call was to his accountant, where Alex began the process of restructuring his business assets. Perfectly legal maneuvers that would make it very difficult for Sarah to claim half of everything he'd built. By the time Alex left the office, he had the framework of a plan in place. But this wasn't just about protecting himself financially. This was about justice. This was about making sure that people who hurt innocent children face consequences. As he drove to pick up Tommy's birthday cake, an elaborate chocolate creation from the best bakery in town, Alex thought about the next phase of his strategy. Sarah and Brett Young had underestimated him, had seen him as just another clueless husband who could be manipulated and discarded. They had no idea they were dealing with a man who'd spent 2 decades learning how to neutralize threats. When Alex arrived home, he found Tommy sitting at the kitchen table, working on homework with the focused concentration of a child trying to forget a bad day. His son's face lit up when he saw the cake box. "Is that for me?" Tommy asked. "Happy birthday, buddy," Alex said, setting the box on the counter. The real celebration starts now. As they shared cake and Alex listened to Tommy talk about his day at school, Alex felt his resolve solidify. This boy deserved better than a mother who would humiliate him for entertainment and grandparents who would laugh at his pain. He deserved a father who would fight for him, who would create a better life for both of them. Sarah came home at midnight, slipping into bed beside Alex with the satisfied exhaustion of someone who'd had a very good evening. She smelled like expensive cologne that wasn't Alex's brand. "How was work?" Alex asked quietly in the darkness. "Exhausting," Sarah murmured, "but productive. We're making progress on the Morrison account." Alex knew there was no Morrison account. He'd checked. "I'm glad," he said, and meant it. Every lie Sarah told, every deception she added to the pile, would make what came next easier to justify. Sweet dreams. As Sarah drifted off to sleep beside him, Alex stared at the ceiling and finalized his plans. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. Chapter 3: The Foundation. The next morning brought the first tangible results of Alex's investigation. Stuart Peters had worked quickly, and the photographs he delivered painted a clear picture of Sarah and Brett's relationship. The gym sessions that ran late into the evening, the hotel visits during Sarah's supposed client lunches, the intimate dinners at restaurants across town where they thought they wouldn't be recognized. But it was the video footage that truly captured Alex's attention. Stuart had managed to record Sarah and Brett at a coffee shop, laughing over Sarah's phone as they replayed the video of Tommy's birthday humiliation. Brett's reaction was particularly telling. He'd thrown his head back in genuine amusement, slapping the table as if it were the funniest thing he'd ever seen. "The boy needs to toughen up anyway." Brett's voice came through clearly on the recording. "Kids today are too soft. A little embarrassment builds character." Sarah had nodded enthusiastically. "Exactly what I told Alex. He's always coddling Tommy. The kid needs to learn how the real world works." Alex closed the laptop and looked across his office at Ian Brennan, who'd been reviewing the financial documents they'd spent the morning organizing. "This is solid evidence of adultery," Ian said, tapping the stack of photographs. "In this state, that gives us significant leverage. Combined with the asset restructuring we've implemented, you'll be in a very strong position." "What about custody?" Alex asked. "Given the evidence of Sarah's casual cruelty toward your son, documented in her own words and actions, I'd say you have an excellent chance of primary custody, especially with your military background and stable business ownership. You're exactly the kind of father courts prefer to see you raising children." Alex nodded, but his mind was already moving beyond the legal aspects of divorce. Sarah and Brett had made this personal when they'd humiliated Tommy. They crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed with paperwork and court orders. "Ian, I need you to handle something else for me," Alex said. "I want to buy Brett Yang's debt." The lawyer raised an eyebrow. "His debt? He owes $15,000 on a personal loan, 3 months behind on his car payments, and I imagine he has credit card debt as well. I want to purchase all of it through intermediary companies so he doesn't know I'm involved. That's unusual and potentially expensive. What's your goal?" Alex's smile was cold and patient. "Control. When you own someone's debt, you own them. I want Brett Young to understand exactly how precarious his position is. I can make some calls, Ian said carefully. But Alex, whatever you're planning, make sure it stays within legal boundaries. You don't want to give Sarah ammunition in custody proceedings. Everything I do will be perfectly legal, Alex assured him. I'm not interested in breaking the law. I'm interested in using it to my advantage. After Ian left, Alex spent the afternoon researching Brett Yang's gym, Elite Fitness. The business was struggling. High overhead, expensive equipment loans, and declining membership numbers. The owner, Eduardo Hoyt, was a former bodybuilder who'd invested everything he had into the gym and was now facing financial difficulties. Alex called Eduardo and arranged a meeting for the following day, presenting himself as a potential investor interested in the fitness industry. It wasn't entirely false. Alex had been considering diversifying his business portfolio, and gyms could be profitable with proper management. That evening, Alex took Tommy out for dinner at their favorite restaurant, just the two of them. His son was still subdued from the morning's humiliation, but he perked up when Alex let him order dessert without finishing his vegetables. "Dad, why did Mom put dog food in my cake?" Tommy asked between bites of ice cream. Alex had been dreading this question, but he'd prepared for it. Sometimes people make choices that hurt others, even when they don't mean to. Your mom thought it would be funny, but she didn't think about how it would make you feel. Grandpa and Grandma thought it was funny too. I know, buddy, and that wasn't right either. You know what, though? You handled it with more dignity than any of them showed. I'm proud of you for that. Tommy considered this seriously, the way children do when they're trying to understand the complex motivations of adults. Are you mad at Mom? Alex chose his words carefully. I'm disappointed that she hurt your feelings, and I'm going to make sure it doesn't happen again. Promise? Promise. When they returned home, Sarah was in the living room, lounging on the couch with her phone. She barely looked up when they entered. How was dinner? She asked, but her tone suggested she was asking out of obligation rather than interest. Good, Alex replied. Tommy, why don't you go get ready for bed? I'll be up to read with you in a few minutes. After Tommy had gone upstairs, Alex sat down across from Sarah. She was scrolling through social media, occasionally smiling at something on her screen. We need to talk about this morning, Alex said. Sarah sighed heavily, as if the conversation was an imposition. Alex, I already told you, it was just a joke. You're making way too big a deal out of this. Our son was humiliated on his birthday. My parents filmed it. You shared it with your friends. How is that not a big deal? For the first time, Sarah looked directly at him, and Alex caught a flash of something cold in her eyes. Maybe if Tommy wasn't so sensitive, it wouldn't have been such a problem. And maybe if you didn't coddle him so much, he'd be able to handle a little teasing. Teasing. Alex kept his voice level, but inside his resolve crystallized further. Sarah, you gave our 8-year-old son dog food instead of a birthday cake, and then laughed when he cried. That's not teasing. That's cruelty. Sarah's cheeks flushed, but with anger rather than shame. Oh, please. One disappointing moment isn't going to traumatize him. Kids need to learn that life isn't always fair. If anything, I was doing him a favor by preparing him for reality. Alex studied his wife's face, looking for any sign of remorse, any indication that she understood the gravity of what she'd done. He found nothing but defensive irritation and self-justification. You're right, he said finally. Life isn't always fair. Sometimes people who think they're cleverer than everyone else discover that they've seriously miscalculated. Sarah's expression shifted slightly, as if she'd caught something in his tone that she couldn't quite identify. What's that supposed to mean? Alex stood up, still wearing that calm, patient smile. It means I'm going to go read to our son, and then I'm going to bed. We'll talk more tomorrow. As he headed upstairs, Alex heard Sarah's phone buzz with a text message, followed by her familiar laugh. No doubt Brett Young was entertaining her with more wisdom about child-rearing and relationship management. Let them laugh, Alex thought as he settled in beside Tommy to read the next chapter of Hatchet, their current bedtime book. Let them think they were so clever, so superior, so much smarter than the boring husband and father they were planning to discard. They had no idea they were dealing with a man who'd spent his adult life learning how to win against superior forces through superior planning. They had no idea that every laugh, every cruel comment, every moment of their shared amusement was being documented and cataloged as evidence. Most importantly, they had no idea that Alex Johnson was the kind of man who, once he'd identified an enemy, would pursue victory with the same methodical precision that had made him successful in both war and business. The foundation was laid. Now it was time to build. Chapter 4. The Structure Rises. Alex's meeting with Eduardo Hoyt at Elite Fitness went exactly as he'd hoped. The gym owner was desperate, facing foreclosure within 60 days unless he could find an investor or buyer. His desperation made him talkative, and within an hour, Alex had a complete picture of the gym's financial situation and Brett Yang's employment status. "Brett's one of our most popular trainers," Eduardo explained as they toured the facility. "The ladies love him. But honestly, he's been a bit of a problem lately. Always requesting time off, showing up late, spending too much time on personal calls during his shifts." Alex nodded sympathetically while mentally noting Brett's schedule, his client list, and the layout of the gym. The building was well-constructed, in a prime location, and with proper management could be profitable. More importantly, it would give Alex direct control over Brett's livelihood. "I'll need a few days to review the financials with my team," Alex told Eduardo. "But I'm very interested. This could be exactly what I'm looking for." 2 days later, Alex owned Elite Fitness through a shell company. Eduardo was so grateful for the cash infusion that he gladly accepted Alex's suggestion to promote the gym's customer service standards and implement stricter employment policies. Brett Yang had no idea his new boss was the husband of the woman he was sleeping with. Meanwhile, Stuart Peters continued his surveillance, providing Alex with a detailed timeline of Sarah and Brett's affair. They met 3 times a week, Mondays at the Marriott downtown, Wednesdays at Brett's apartment, and Fridays at various restaurants around the city. Sarah had even taken vacation days to spend full afternoons with Brett, lying to Alex about spa visits and shopping trips with friends. The most damaging evidence came from a recording Stuart had made at Brett's apartment. Through a directional microphone, he'd captured a conversation that revealed the true scope of Sarah and Brett's planning. "He's such a pushover," Sarah's voice was clear on the recording. 20 years of marriage, and he's never stood up to me once. When I file for divorce, he'll probably just roll over and agree to whatever I ask for. What about the kid?" Brett's voice carried casual indifference. "Tommy? Alex can have him. I never wanted children anyway. The whole mother thing was just part of the package deal. Now that I've found someone who actually understands me, I don't need to pretend anymore." Alex had listened to this recording 3 times, each playback strengthening his resolve. Sarah wasn't just betraying their marriage. She was planning to abandon their son. Tommy would grow up knowing his mother had chosen another man over him, had walked away without a fight. That was unacceptable. Alex's next move was psychological. He began subtly altering Sarah's routine, creating small disruptions that would increase her stress and push her toward making mistakes. He rescheduled contractors to work on their house during times when Sarah usually met Brett, forcing her to find excuses to leave. He arranged for Tommy's school events to conflict with her planned afternoons away. He even had their credit cards temporarily flagged for suspicious activity, creating hassles when she tried to pay for hotel rooms. None of these actions were overtly suspicious, but together they created a pattern of frustration that began affecting Sarah's mood and judgment. "Why is everything falling apart lately?" Sarah complained one evening after a particularly difficult day. Her credit card had been declined at lunch. The house alarm had malfunctioned during a planned rendezvous with Brett, and she'd received a notice that her gym membership needed updating. "Just bad luck, I guess," Alex replied, not looking up from the financial reports he was reviewing. "These things happen in clusters sometimes." Sarah studied his face suspiciously. "It's like someone's deliberately sabotaging my schedule." Alex glanced up with apparent concern. "That's a strange thing to say. Who would want to sabotage your schedule?" "I don't know. It just feels coordinated. Maybe you're just stressed from work," Alex suggested. "The Morrison account has been keeping you busy lately." Sarah's expression tightened slightly. She'd forgotten that she'd claimed to be working on a non-existent account. "Right. The Morrison account. It's been challenging. I'm sure you'll figure it out, Alex said, returning to his papers. You always do. But Sarah's paranoia was growing, and paranoid people made mistakes. Alex was counting on it. At the gym, Brett was experiencing his own set of frustrations. His new management had implemented strict policies about punctuality, customer service, and appropriate relationships with clients. 3 written warnings for various infractions had appeared in his personnel file, each one documented with security camera footage and witness statements. It's like they're watching my every move, Brett complained to Sarah during one of their Wednesday afternoon meetings. The new owner is some kind of control freak. Everything has to be perfect. Everything has to be documented. At least you have job security, Sarah replied, but her tone was distracted. She was thinking about the series of small disasters that had been plaguing her schedule. For now, but one more write-up and I'm out. They made that very clear. Alex, listening to this conversation through Stewart's surveillance equipment, smiled with satisfaction. Brett was walking a tightrope, and Alex controlled both ends of the rope. The debt acquisition had also been successful. Through a series of intermediary companies, Alex now owned Brett's car loan, his personal loan, and had purchased his credit card debt from the original issuer. Brett had no idea that his financial obligations now ran directly to the man whose wife he was seducing. Phase 2 of Alex's plan was ready to implement. Late one evening, as Sarah slept beside him, Alex received a text from an unknown number. Your wife is cheating on you. Elite Fitness, Tuesday, 3 p.m. Check the Marriott downtown if you want proof. Alex deleted the message and smiled in the darkness. Anonymous tips were so useful, especially when they came from fictional concerned citizens who happened to know exactly when and where to look for evidence. Tomorrow, Alex would play the role of the suspicious husband, conducting his own investigation and discovering his wife's betrayal. He would be shocked, hurt, and desperate for guidance. The perfect setup for what would come next. Sarah and Brett had no idea they were about to spring their own trap. Chapter 5. The Walls Close In. Alex's performance as the devastated husband, discovering his wife's affair, was flawless. He followed Sarah to the Marriott on Tuesday afternoon, timing his arrival to catch her and Brett entering the elevator together. The security cameras captured his apparent shock, his hands trembling as he approached the front desk, his voice breaking as he asked which room his wife had checked into. I'm sorry, sir, but I can't provide guest information, the desk clerk had said. Please, Alex had replied, his voice perfectly pitched between hurt and desperate. I think my wife is here with another man. I just need to know if I'm losing my mind. The desk clerk, a young woman named Cara Mays, had taken pity on him. While she couldn't provide room numbers, she could confirm that a Sarah Johnson had indeed checked in that afternoon with a male companion. Alex had thanked her profusely, handed her a $100 tip, and left the hotel looking like a broken man. The security footage would show exactly what any reasonable person would expect to see: a loyal husband discovering the worst betrayal possible. That evening, Alex confronted Sarah with the evidence he gathered. He sat her down in their living room, his hands visibly shaking, his voice carefully modulated to convey hurt rather than anger. I followed you today, he said quietly. I know about Brett Young. Sarah's face went through a rapid series of expressions: surprise, panic, calculation, and finally defiance. How long have you known? I've suspected for a while, but today confirmed it. Sarah, we've been married for 10 years. We have a son together. How could you do this to our family? Instead of remorse, Sarah's expression hardened into something cold and determined. Because I'm not happy, Alex. I haven't been happy for years. Brett makes me feel alive again. Makes me feel like the woman I used to be before I got trapped in this suburban housewife nightmare. Alex blinked as if he'd been slapped. Trapped? Sarah, we built this life together. We planned it together. You planned it, Sarah corrected. I went along with it because I thought it was what I was supposed to want. But I'm done pretending. I'm done living a lie for the sake of appearances. What about Tommy? Sarah's expression didn't soften. Tommy will be fine. Kids adapt. He'll probably be better off with you anyway. You're the one who actually enjoys playing house. Alex let his shoulders slump, playing the role of the defeated husband. So what happens now? Now, I'm going to be honest for the first time in years, Sarah said, standing up and pacing to the window. I want to divorce Alex. I want to start over with someone who actually appreciates me. Someone like Brett Young. Yes, someone like Brett. Alex was quiet for a long moment, letting the silence stretch between them. Can I ask you something? And will you give me an honest answer? Sarah turned back to him, and for just a moment, her expression softened slightly. What? Was any of it real? Our marriage, our family, was any of it real for you? Sarah considered the question, and when she answered, her voice carried a finality that confirmed everything Alex had suspected. I thought it was at the time, but looking back, I think I was just playing a role that everyone expected me to play. Brett helped me realize that I don't have to keep pretending to be someone I'm not. Alex nodded slowly, as if processing this devastating revelation. I see. And the thing with Tommy's birthday cake, was that part of being your authentic self? A flicker of discomfort crossed Sarah's face. That was just, I was stressed. Brett said Tommy needed to toughen up, and I guess I let that influence me too much. Brett has opinions about how to raise our son. He's been around kids before. He knows what he's talking about. Alex filed this information away with everything else. Sarah was so deep in her fantasy that she was taking parenting advice from a man who had no children and no apparent interest in having any. What do you want from me? Alex asked quietly. I want you to make this easy, Sarah replied. I want us to handle this like adults. We'll split everything fairly, figure out custody arrangements, and move on with our lives. Alex nodded as if he were considering this reasonable proposal. I'll need some time to process all of this. It's a lot to take in. Of course. Take all the time you need. But Alex, I hope you understand that my mind is made up. This isn't something I'm doing impulsively. I've thought about it for months. After Sarah went upstairs, presumably to text Brett about the conversation, Alex sat alone in his living room and felt a cold satisfaction settle over him. Sarah had just made several critical mistakes. She'd admitted to adultery without any coercion. She'd expressed her intention to abandon their son. Most importantly, she'd revealed that Brett Young was influencing her decisions about Tommy's welfare. Any family court judge would find Sarah's casual attitude toward her son's emotional needs deeply troubling. But Alex wasn't content to simply win a custody battle. Sarah and Brett had hurt his child, had laughed at Tommy's pain, had planned to tear apart his family for their own selfish desires. Legal victory wasn't enough. They needed to understand that actions had consequences and that some people couldn't be manipulated or discarded without repercussions. The next phase of Alex's plan required precision, timing, and careful orchestration. Over the following week, he began implementing a series of moves that would systematically dismantle both Sarah and Brett's carefully constructed lives. At Elite Fitness, Brett received his final warning for inappropriate conduct with female clients. Security cameras had captured him exchanging personal phone numbers with married women, using gym equipment during off hours without authorization, and spending excessive time in private training sessions that involved more conversation than exercise. One more incident and you're terminated, Eduardo informed him. The new ownership is very strict about maintaining professional standards. Brett was furious but powerless. He needed the job, especially with his mounting debt obligations. What he didn't know was that those debts were about to become much more demanding. Alex's intermediary companies began calling in Brett's loans simultaneously. His car loan was accelerated due to missed payments. His personal loan was declared in default, and his credit card were frozen pending review of his account status. Within a single week, Brett went from financial stress to financial crisis. How can they all demand payment at once? Brett asked Sarah during one of their increasingly tense meetings. It's like they're coordinating against me. Maybe it's just bad timing, Sarah replied, but she was dealing with her own mysterious problems. Her credit score had suddenly dropped due to irregularities in her financial history. Her company's HR department had received an anonymous tip about her falsified expense reports, leading to an internal investigation. Even her gym membership had been revoked due to a clerical error that would take weeks to resolve. Both Sarah and Brett were beginning to feel like they were under siege, but neither could identify the source of their troubles. Their stress was affecting their relationship, creating tension and blame where there had once been passion and excitement. Alex watched it all unfold with the patience of a man who understood that the best victories were those where your enemies defeated themselves. He was simply providing the pressure that revealed their true characters. The final phase was ready to begin. Chapter 6. The Trap Springs. The anonymous letter arrived at Sarah's workplace on a Thursday morning, delivered by a courier service that had no record of who had paid for the delivery. It was addressed to her personally and marked confidential, personal matter. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a brief message printed in generic font. Your husband knows everything. He's been planning his revenge for weeks. Check your bank accounts. Check your credit report. Ask yourself why everything in your life is suddenly falling apart. Get out now before it's too late. Sarah's hands trembled as she read the message twice, then a third time. She immediately called Brett, who was dealing with his own crisis at the gym. We need to meet, she said, her voice tight with panic. Something's wrong. Something's very wrong. They met at a coffee shop across town, both looking haggard and suspicious. Sarah showed Brett the letter, and his face went pale as he read it. This explains everything, Brett said, his voice hollow. The job problems, the loan issues, the surveillance at work. He's been orchestrating this whole thing. But how? Alex doesn't have the connections or the knowledge to pull off something like this. He builds houses. He was military, Brett reminded her. Special forces guys learn all kinds of skills. And he's got money, Sarah. Rich people can buy any kind of help they need. Sarah felt a chill of real fear. She'd always seen Alex as predictable, controllable, the kind of man who would accept whatever life handed him without fighting back. The idea that he might be actively working against her was terrifying. What do we do? She asked. Brett was quiet for a long moment, thinking. We accelerate our timeline. You file for divorce immediately, before he can make any more moves. We take whatever we can get and disappear. Disappear where? I've got connections in other states. We can start over somewhere else, somewhere he can't reach us. Sarah felt her carefully constructed fantasy beginning to crumble. Instead of a romantic new beginning with Brett, she was facing the prospect of running away like a criminal, abandoning her comfortable life and her son for an uncertain future with a man she was beginning to realize she barely knew. What about Tommy? She asked. Brett's expression hardened. What about him? You said yourself he'd be better off with his father. This just makes it official. The casual way he dismissed her son's welfare was like a slap in the face. Brett, he's my child. And he's Alex's child, too. Look, Sarah, we always knew this was going to be complicated. But if your husband is really as dangerous as this letter suggests, then staying here isn't an option. We take what we can get and go, or we risk losing everything. That evening, Sarah returned home to find Alex in his study, calmly reviewing documents. Tommy was upstairs doing homework, and the house felt peaceful, normal. It was hard to reconcile this domestic tranquility with the image of Alex as a ruthless manipulator orchestrating her downfall. Alex, we need to talk, she said from the doorway. He looked up with what appeared to be genuine surprise. Of course. Come in. Sarah entered the study and closed the door behind her. I've decided I want to proceed with the divorce immediately. I've already contacted a lawyer. Alex's expression shifted to what looked like resignation mixed with sadness. I see. I was hoping we might try counseling first, but if your mind is made up, it is. I want this to be as straightforward as possible. We split the assets 50-50. I take my personal belongings, and we work out a custody arrangement for Tommy. What kind of custody arrangement were you thinking? Sarah hesitated. This was the moment where she would reveal her true intentions. I think Tommy would be better off with you as the primary guardian. I'll take visitation rights, of course, but you're more suited to daily parenting responsibilities. Alex was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice carried a note of genuine confusion. Sarah, are you saying you don't want custody of our son? I'm saying I want what's best for him. And what's best for him is stability, routine, a parent who can be there consistently. You can provide that better than I can. Because you're planning to leave town? Sarah's eyes sharpened. What makes you say that? Just a feeling. The way you're talking, It sounds like you're planning to start completely over somewhere else. The conversation was making Sarah increasingly uncomfortable. Alex seemed surprised by her decisions rather than triumphant, confused rather than calculating. Either he was an exceptional actor or the anonymous letter had been wrong about his involvement in her recent troubles. I just want us both to be able to move forward with our lives, she said carefully. I understand. And Sarah, despite everything that's happened, I want you to be happy. If Brett Young makes you happy, then I hope things work out for you. The casual mention of Brett's name hit Sarah like a physical blow. Alex knew about Brett, had known all along, but his tone carried no anger or threat, just tired acceptance. How long have you known? She asked. A few weeks. I had you followed. And you didn't say anything? Alex shrugged. What was I supposed to say? That I wanted you to stay with someone who clearly didn't want to be here? That I wanted to force you to pretend to love me and our son? Sarah felt tears welling up in her eyes, but she wasn't sure if they were from guilt, relief, or confusion. Alex, I never meant for things to happen this way. I know. These things rarely happen the way we plan them. Alex paused, then continued in a quieter voice. Can I ask you one favor? What? Don't disappear without saying goodbye to Tommy. Whatever happens between us, he deserves to hear from you that it's not his fault. Sarah nodded, not trusting her voice. The conversation wasn't going anything like she'd expected. Instead of the confrontation she'd braced for, Alex was being reasonable, understanding, even kind. It was making her question everything Brett had told her about Alex's supposed revenge campaign. After Sarah left the study, Alex sat back in his chair and smiled. The performance had been perfect. Sarah was now completely off balance, questioning her assumptions, doubting Brett's judgment. The anonymous letter had done exactly what Alex had intended. It had forced Sarah and Brett to reveal their true characters under pressure. Brett had immediately suggested running away, abandoning Tommy without a second thought. Sarah had been willing to consider it. Both of them had shown that when faced with consequences for their actions, their first instinct was to flee rather than take responsibility. It was exactly the evidence Alex needed for the final phase of his plan. Tomorrow, everything would come together. Sarah and Brett had played their parts perfectly, never realizing they were following a script Alex had written from the beginning. The trap had sprung. Now it was time to collect what he was owed. Chapter 7. The Reckoning Begins. Alex's plan reached its crescendo on a Friday afternoon when multiple carefully orchestrated events converged with military precision. He'd spent weeks positioning the pieces, and now it was time to watch them fall. At exactly 2:30 p.m., Brett Young received a phone call at Elite Fitness from a debt collection agency, informing him that all his loans had been consolidated and were now due in full within 48 hours. The total amount was $63,000, far more than Brett had realized he owed due to accelerated interest and penalties. There must be some mistake, Brett protested. I need to speak to a supervisor. The loans have been purchased by a private investment firm, the collection agent explained. They have the legal right to demand immediate payment. If you cannot comply, repossession proceedings will begin Monday morning. At the same time, Sarah was sitting in her divorce attorney's office, receiving devastating news about her legal position. The lawyer, Tony Black, was one of the most expensive in the city, but his expression was grim as he reviewed Alex's financial disclosures. Mrs. Johnson, I'm afraid your husband has restructured his assets in a way that significantly limits what you can claim in a divorce settlement, Tony explained. His business holdings have been moved into trusts and LLCs that predate your marriage. Most of your joint assets appear to have been funded primarily by his earnings, which gives him considerable leverage. But we've been married for 10 years, Sarah protested. I contributed to building that life. That's certainly an argument we can make, but the documentation suggests otherwise. Your husband has been very thorough in establishing the source of all marital assets. Additionally, we have the problem of the adultery evidence. Sarah's stomach dropped. What adultery evidence? Tony slid a thick folder across the desk. Security camera footage, private investigator reports, financial records showing hotel payments and gifts to your boyfriend. Mrs. Johnson, your husband has documented everything. In a state where adultery affects both asset division and custody decisions, this evidence is devastating. Sarah opened the folder with trembling hands and saw photograph after photograph of her and Brett together. Hotel receipts with her signature, text message transcripts, even the video of Tommy's birthday humiliation, with timestamps showing when she'd shared it with Brett. There's more, Tony continued. Your husband has evidence that your boyfriend has been influencing your parenting decisions regarding your son. Family courts take a very dim view of that kind of outside interference in child welfare. Meanwhile, at Elite Fitness, Brett was experiencing his own catastrophe. Eduardo Hoyt called him into the office and handed him a termination notice, effective immediately. I'm sorry, Brett, but the new ownership has made it clear that your employment here is no longer viable, Eduardo explained. There have been too many incidents, too many violations of company policy. This is insane, Brett protested. I've been one of your best trainers for 3 years. That may be true, but the new management has different standards. Your final paycheck will be ready Monday, minus deductions for equipment damage and policy violations. Brett stormed out of the gym, his phone buzzing with calls from creditors and collection agencies. His car had already been repossessed from the parking lot while he was being fired. His apartment lease was in jeopardy due to missed payments. In the span of 2 hours, his entire life had collapsed. He called Sarah in a panic. We need to meet right now. Everything's falling apart. Sarah, still reeling from her attorney's revelations, agreed to meet at their usual coffee shop. When she arrived, Brett looked like a man on the edge of a breakdown. His face was pale, his hands shaking, his usual confident demeanor completely shattered. They know everything, Brett said without preamble. Your husband has been planning this for weeks, maybe months. He's destroyed my credit, got me fired, taken my car. I'm completely ruined. How could he have that kind of power? Sarah asked, though her meeting with Tony Black had already answered that question. Money and connections. I underestimated him completely. I thought he was just some boring contractor who wouldn't fight back. But he's been playing chess while we were playing checkers. Sarah showed Brett the evidence folder from her attorney's office. His face went ashen as he flipped through the photographs and documents. We're screwed, he said flatly. Completely and totally screwed. There has to be something we can do, Sarah said, but her voice lacked conviction. Some way to fight back. Brett laughed bitterly. Fight back with what? I don't have a job, a car, or a place to live. And you're about to lose everything in the divorce. Your husband has made sure we have nothing left to fight with. The reality of their situation was settling over them both like a suffocating blanket. The passionate affair that had seemed so romantic and exciting just weeks ago now felt foolish and destructive. They'd traded their secure lives for a fantasy that had evaporated the moment it faced real consequences. I have to go back to him, Sarah said quietly. I have to try to fix this before it's too late. Brett's expression hardened. Go back to him? Sarah, you filed for divorce. You told him you were leaving him for me. There's no going back from that. Maybe if I apologize, if I explain that I made a mistake, he's not going to forgive you. Look at what he's done to us. This isn't the work of someone who's interested in reconciliation. This is revenge, pure and simple. Sarah stared at the evidence folder, feeling the full weight of her choices. She convinced herself that Alex was weak, that he would simply accept whatever she decided to do. Instead, she'd awakened something implacable and ruthless, something that had systematically dismantled her life while she remained oblivious to the threat. What about Tommy? She asked. What about him? You already told your husband he could have custody. The kid will be fine. The casual dismissal of her son's welfare was the final straw. Sarah looked at Brett Young, really looked at him, and saw him clearly for the first time. Without his confident swagger, without his easy charm, he was just a selfish man who'd convinced her to destroy her family for his own gratification. I need to go home, she said, standing up from the table. Sarah, wait. We can figure this out. Maybe if we leave town tonight, start over somewhere else. With what money? You just said yourself we have nothing left. Brett's desperation was palpable. I'll figure something out. I always do. But we can't give up now. Not when we've come this far. Sarah looked at this man who'd promised her a new life, who'd convinced her to abandon her family, who was now suggesting they run away like criminals. The fantasy was completely dead now, replaced by the harsh reality of consequences and regret. "Goodbye, Brett," she said and walked away. As Sarah drove home, she tried to prepare herself for what would likely be the most difficult conversation of her life. She'd betrayed her husband, abandoned her son, and destroyed her family for a man who'd proven to be nothing more than a coward when faced with adversity. But the worst part was knowing that Alex had been right about Brett all along. And Alex had been planning this confrontation from the beginning, had seen through both of them with a clarity that made her feel foolish and naive. She pulled into her driveway and sat in the car for several minutes, staring at the house she'd taken for granted, thinking about the family she'd been so eager to discard. Through the front window, she could see Alex helping Tommy with his homework at the kitchen table, both of them focused and content. It was a scene of domestic peace that she'd scorned just days ago. Now it looked like everything she'd lost and might never get back. Sarah took a deep breath and prepared to face the consequences of her choices. Chapter 8. The Price of Betrayal. Sarah found Alex exactly where she'd seen him through the window, sitting at the kitchen table with Tommy, working through a math worksheet. The scene was so normal, so comfortable, that it made her chest ache with regret. This was what she'd thrown away. Not just a marriage, but a family, a home, a life that she'd been too selfish to value. "Dad, I don't understand this one," Tommy was saying, pointing to a word problem about calculating the area of a rectangle. "Let's break it down," Alex replied patiently. "What information does the problem give us?" Sarah watched this interaction for a moment, remembering when she used to be part of these evening routines. When had she stopped caring about Tommy's homework, about his small daily struggles and victories? When had she started seeing her own family as an obstacle to her happiness instead of the foundation of it? "Alex, can we talk?" she said from the doorway. Both Alex and Tommy looked up. Alex's expression was neutral, but Tommy's face brightened with genuine pleasure at seeing his mother. "Mom, want to help with my math? Dad's really good at explaining it." Sarah felt her throat tighten. "Maybe later, sweetheart. I need to talk to your dad first." Alex stood up, ruffling Tommy's hair. "Keep working on that one, buddy. I'll be right back." They went into Alex's study, where Sarah had initiated so many conversations over the years. Now the room felt different, charged with tension and unspoken accusations. Alex closed the door and turned to face her, his expression calm but watchful. "How did your meeting with the lawyer go?" he asked. Sarah was startled by the directness of the question. "You know about that?" "Sarah, I've known about everything from the beginning. Your affair with Brett Young, your plans to leave, your intention to abandon Tommy. I've been waiting for you to be honest about it." The word abandon hit Sarah like a physical blow. "I wasn't abandoning Tommy. I thought he'd be better off with you." "Better off or more convenient for your new life?" Sarah couldn't meet his eyes. "Alex, I know I've made terrible mistakes. I know I've hurt you and Tommy, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Are you sorry because you regret your choices, or because those choices have consequences?" The question was devastating in its accuracy. Sarah realized she didn't know the answer, and that uncertainty terrified her. "I want to try to fix this," she said quietly. "I want to find a way to make things right." Alex studied her face for a long moment. "Do you love Brett Young?" I thought I did, but I don't think I really knew him. When everything started falling apart, he just wanted to run away. He was willing to abandon Tommy without a second thought. And that surprised you?" Sarah's cheeks burned with shame. "Yes. No. I don't know. I wasn't thinking clearly about any of this." "You were thinking clearly enough to humiliate our son on his birthday. You were thinking clearly enough to share that humiliation with your boyfriend. You were thinking clearly enough to plan a life that didn't include Tommy." Each accusation was delivered in the same calm, measured tone, but they cut deeper than shouting would have. Sarah felt tears starting to fall, but Alex's expression didn't soften. "I know," she whispered. "I know I was cruel to him. I know I was a terrible mother. But Alex, I want to try to be better. I want to try to fix this family." "What?" The single word hung in the air between them. Sarah realized that Alex was asking her to examine her true motivations, to be honest about whether her desire for reconciliation was genuine or just another form of self-preservation. "Because I love you," she said finally. "Because I love Tommy. Because I threw away the most important things in my life for something that was never real." Alex was quiet for a long time, and when he spoke, his voice carried a finality that made Sarah's heart sink. "Sarah, there's something you need to understand. I could forgive you for betraying me. I could probably even forgive you for the affair, for the lies, for choosing another man over our marriage. But I will never forgive you for what you did to Tommy. Alex, please. You humiliated our 8-year-old son on his birthday. You laughed while he cried. You shared his pain with your boyfriend as entertainment. And when you thought about your future with Brett, you saw Tommy as an inconvenience to be discarded." Sarah felt the weight of those accusations settling over her like a suffocating blanket. "I know I was wrong. I know I hurt him. But children forgive, don't they? Can I try to make it up to him? Tommy does forgive easily. He's a good kid with a generous heart. But I'm his father, and my job is to protect him from people who would hurt him, even if one of those people is his mother." The finality in Alex's voice was terrifying. Sarah realized that she'd fundamentally misunderstood the man she'd married. She'd seen his kindness as weakness, his patience as passivity. She'd never considered that beneath that calm exterior was a core of absolute resolve when it came to protecting the people he loved. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now you make a choice," Alex said. "You can fight the divorce, try to claim assets you have no legal right to, attempt to get custody of a child you've already demonstrated you don't want. You can make this ugly and painful for everyone involved. Or you can accept the settlement I'm offering. You get your personal belongings, your car, and $50,000 to help you start over. In exchange, you sign away any claim to marital assets and agree to supervise visitation with Tommy until he's old enough to decide for himself whether he wants a relationship with you." Sarah felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. "Supervised visitation? You've demonstrated poor judgment regarding Tommy's welfare. You've shown that you prioritize adult relationships over his emotional needs. Until you can prove otherwise, any contact with our son will be supervised by a court-appointed guardian." The proposal was devastating but not unreasonable. Sarah knew that any family court judge would reach similar conclusions based on the evidence Alex had gathered. Her choices had painted a clear picture of a mother who was willing to abandon her child for personal gratification. "And if I don't agree? Then we go to court, where a judge will see all the evidence of your adultery, your abandonment of Tommy, and your plan to leave the state with a man who has no legal right to influence decisions about her son's welfare. You'll get less money, lose any chance of meaningful custody, and Tommy will have to testify about how you made him feel when you gave him dog food for his birthday." The thought of Tommy having to relive that humiliation in court was unbearable. Sarah realized that Alex had constructed this choice carefully, making the path of least resistance also the path that would cause the least additional trauma to their son. "I need time to think," she said. "Of course. But Sarah, understand that this offer expires in 48 hours. After that, we do this the hard way." As Sarah prepared to leave the study, Alex spoke one more time. "There's one more thing you should know. Brett Young has been completely cut off from all financial resources. His credit is destroyed, his employment terminated, his debts called in. He has nothing left and no way to rebuild." Sarah turned back to face him. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I want you to understand that running away with him isn't an option anymore. Your fantasy is over, Sarah. Now you have to live in the real world, where actions have consequences and people who hurt children face justice." Sarah left the study feeling like she'd been hollowed out from the inside. She'd entered the conversation hoping for forgiveness, for a chance to rebuild her family. Instead, she discovered that she'd married a man far more formidable than she'd ever imagined, a man who'd systematically dismantled her life while giving her every opportunity to make better choices. As she packed her belongings that night, Sarah could hear Alex reading to Tommy in the next room, their voices carrying the easy comfort of a father and son who genuinely enjoyed each other's company. It was a relationship she'd taken for granted, a bond she'd been willing to sacrifice for her own selfish desires. Now it was lost to her, possibly forever. Chapter 9. The Last Laugh. 6 months later, Alex stood in the kitchen of their house, his house now, watching Tommy blow out 9 candles on an elaborate superhero-themed birthday cake. The boy's face was radiant with happiness, surrounded by friends from school and teammates from his Little League team. The contrast with the previous year's humiliation couldn't have been more complete. "Make a wish, buddy," Alex said, his hand resting gently on his son's shoulder. Tommy closed his eyes, concentrated for a moment, then blew out all the candles in one breath. The room erupted in cheers and applause. "What did you wish for?" asked Austin Yoder, Tommy's best friend. "Can't tell you, or it won't come true," Tommy replied with the wisdom of 9 years. But he looked up at his father with a smile that suggested his most important wish had already been granted. The past 6 months had been a period of healing and rebuilding for both of them. Tommy had struggled initially with his mother's absence, asking difficult questions about why she'd chosen to leave. Alex had been honest, but age-appropriate in his explanations, focusing on the fact that sometimes adults make choices that hurt the people they love, but that didn't mean the hurt was deserved or permanent. Sarah had signed the divorce settlement without contesting it. The supervised visitation arrangements had been used exactly twice, both awkward, stilted encounters that left Tommy confused and upset. After the second visit, Sarah had stopped requesting them altogether. She'd moved to another state, ostensibly to start fresh, though Alex suspected she was simply running from the consequences of her choices. Brett Young had disappeared entirely. His financial ruin had been complete and irreversible. The debt consolidation had triggered a cascade of legal and personal problems that left him unable to remain in the city. Stuart Peters had tracked him to a small town in Nevada, where he was apparently working construction for minimum wage and living in a studio apartment. The fitness instructor who'd once seduced wealthy married women was now just another middle-aged man struggling to pay rent. Alex felt no sympathy for either of them. They'd made their choices with full knowledge of the potential consequences. They'd chosen cruelty over kindness, selfishness over responsibility, fantasy over reality. The fact that their choices had led to predictable outcomes was justice, not tragedy. "Dad, can we play baseball in the backyard?" Tommy asked as the party began winding down. "Absolutely. Let me help clean up first, then we'll get the gloves." As Alex cleared cake plates and picked up wrapping paper, he reflected on the lessons of the past year. He'd learned that patience and planning were more powerful than anger and impulse. He'd learned that people revealed their true characters under pressure, and that character was destiny. Most importantly, he'd learned that protecting the innocent sometimes required being ruthless with the guilty. His phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Alex opened it, curious. "I know what you did to us. I know how you destroyed our lives. This isn't over." Alex smiled and deleted the message. Brett Young, apparently. The man still didn't understand that his life had been destroyed by his own choices, not by Alex's response to them. Some people never learned to take responsibility for their actions. Alex typed a brief reply. "Your threats are documented and will be forwarded to local authorities. Any further contact will be considered harassment. Move on with your life." Then he blocked the number and forgot about it. Brett Young was yesterday's problem, and Alex had more important things to focus on. Tommy appeared at his elbow, baseball glove in hand. "Ready, Dad?" "Ready." They went into the backyard, where the late afternoon sun was casting long shadows across the grass. Alex pitched gently while Tommy practiced his swing, both of them laughing when the ball sailed over the fence into the neighbor's yard. "I'm getting better, aren't I?" Tommy asked as they retrieved the ball. "You're getting much better. Keep practicing, and you'll be starting shortstop next season. Will you come to all my games?" "Every single one," Alex promised. "That's what dads do." Tommy beamed at this assurance, and Alex felt a deep satisfaction that had nothing to do with revenge or justice. This was what victory actually looked like, not the destruction of enemies, but the protection of innocence, the preservation of love, the building of a life worth living. As they played catch in the fading light, Alex thought about the future he was building with his son. Tommy would grow up knowing that his father would fight for him, would protect him, would never abandon him for personal convenience. He would learn that actions had consequences, that loyalty was rewarded, and that some things were worth fighting for. He would also learn that some people couldn't be trusted, that some wounds couldn't be healed with forgiveness alone, and that sometimes the only way to stop a bully was to demonstrate that their actions would have costs they couldn't afford to pay. These were hard lessons, but necessary ones. The world could be cruel, but it was also fair in its own way. People who treated others with kindness and respect generally found kindness and respect returned. People who chose cruelty and betrayal generally found themselves alone with the consequences of their choices. Sarah had learned this lesson too late. Brett Young was still learning it. But Tommy would grow up understanding it from the beginning, which would make him stronger, wiser, and better prepared for whatever challenges life might bring. As the sun set and they headed inside for dinner, Alex reflected on the justice of it all. A year ago, he'd been a man whose family was being quietly destroyed by people who saw his kindness as weakness. Today, he was a single father raising a happy, healthy son in a home filled with love and security. Sarah was alone in another state, probably telling herself that she was the victim of circumstances beyond her control. Brett Young was working manual labor and living in poverty, no doubt blaming Alex for consequences that were entirely the result of his own actions. But Alex and Tommy were together, building a life based on mutual respect, genuine affection, and unwavering loyalty. They were the ones who had truly won. That night, as Alex tucked Tommy into bed, his son looked up at him with serious eyes. "Dad, are you happy?" Alex considered the question carefully. "Yes, buddy. I'm happy. Are you?" "Yeah. I like it being just us. It feels safe." Alex kissed his son's forehead,